I think we should start quite promptly and move ahead quite promptly. So I'm going to be quite strict with timekeeping because I'm aware that we have 4 very interesting talks to hear. So for our second panel, we'll be thinking about Chinese visual culture in particular. I'd like to start by welcoming Professor Paul Gladston, who is head of the Department of Culture, Film and Media at Nottingham University, and has come today especially from Nottingham, so thank you very much to you. Professor Gladston's academic career has involved many years of working with China and indeed in China, so he's excellently placed to tell us about cultural policy and the contested significance of contemporary art from China. Paul.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation to take part in today's panel. In this short paper, I shall reflect critically on recent Chinese state policy related to cultural industries and diplomacy, as well as the contested significance of contemporary art from China. I shall conclude by arguing for the necessity of new interpretative paradigms beyond those which currently inform local and international debates on the significance of contemporary Chinese art. Throughout the 1990s, contemporary art in the People's Republic of China continued to occupy a position of relative estrangement from mainstream politics. Although some artists, curators and critics sought to extend the humanist project of the unofficial contemporary art movement of the 1980s, known as the 85 New Wave, by establishing some sort of rapprochement between contemporary art and governmental policy, most contemporary art remained outside the economic and political interests of China's ruling Communist Party. The high watermark of contemporary art's estrangement from mainstream politics in the PRC was congruent with extreme forms of body art developed in the late 1990s, which eventually led to the handing down of the Ministry of Culture notice outlawing pornography and extreme forms of bodily violence in the name of art in 2001. With the staging of the 2000 Shanghai Biennale, however, a new situation began to emerge, which saw increasing governmental interest in contemporary art as a progressive manifestation of Chinese modernity, both internationally and within the PRC. A growing awareness among government officials in the 1990s and early 2000s of contemporary Chinese art's prodigious economic and cultural successes in the international art world led to a revised outlook on its relationship with governmental reforms. In a speech given on the occasion of the 7th National Congress of the China Federation of Literary and Arts Circles on the 18th of December 2001, President Jiang Zemin gave a brief summary of the CCP's emerging view of culture as part of the PRC's involvement in international competition. In his speech, Jiang argued that it was important for developing countries, such as the PRC, his words, not mine, to preserve and develop the excellent traditions of their native national cultures and to promote national spirit, actively absorb the fine cultural fruits from other nations and push the update of native cultures. Views redolent not only of passages in Mao Zedong's Yan'an talks of 1942, but also of the distancing from Soviet influence which took place in the PRC in the late 1950s. Jiang had already delivered similar remarks on various occasions before his speech at the National Congress, repeatedly emphasizing the strategic significance of culture as part of a competitive global environment. In response to Jiang's vision, CCP officials began to develop new ways of promoting Chinese culture, both as an expression of modern indigenous identity and as a focus for the exercising of influence abroad. This amounted to a major shift in outlook away from the CCP's prior concentration on economic and social reform towards a structural coordination of socio-economic and cultural interests in support of China's continuing modernisation. As early as 1998, the PRC's Ministry of Culture had established a bureau charged with developing policies in relation to the cultural industries. This was followed by the acceptance of a proposal at the 5th plenum of the 15th CCP Central Committee in October 2000 that set out far-reaching policy for reforming cultural production and administration of the PRC, and that repeatedly used the term cultural industry. The proposal at the 5th plenum was further supported by the official report of the CCP's 16th National Congress in 2002, which states that in the current market economy, developing cultural industries is a very important way to achieve socialist cultural prosperity and to meet the spiritual and cultural needs of the people. The development of an official policy on the cultural industries in the PRC was accompanied by that of another on the PRC's use of cultural diplomacy. In 2000, Jiang Zemin asserted publicly that the CCP should be the leading force of Chinese culture, stating that the PRC should aim to be a powerful nation not only politically and economically, but also culturally. Jiang argued that in order to achieve this position of economic, political and cultural power, the PRC should engage with cultural developments on the international stage, and in doing so promote Chinese culture abroad. At the 17th National Congress of the CCP in 2007, he further asserted the importance of the PRC's international diplomacy by calling for improvements in the country's use of soft power. The co-opting of contemporary Chinese art to the political interests of the CCP since the early 2000s has taken a number of forms. In recent years, Chinese higher education institutions involved in the teaching of art and design have become increasingly subject to calls from the CCP to strengthen the PRC's creative industries sector. In response, many of those institutions have embraced modern modes of cultural production, including the use of new digital and computer-based technologies, which are taught alongside more established modern and traditional approaches. There have also been significant exhibitions of contemporary Chinese art at major national institutions, as well as governmentally supported exhibitions of contemporary Chinese art outside the PRC. Recent acceptance of the value of contemporary art by the Chinese state is thus fundamentally enmeshed with the CCP's continuing commitment to economic and political reform, as well as the projection of Chinese power internationally. Contemporary art in China may have been held at arm's length from centralised power throughout much of the 1990s, but the 2000s have seen its progressive institutionalisation. Although current political conditions in the PRC differ markedly from those during the Maoist period, the recuperation of contemporary art to political power in the PRC since the 2000s is in effect a modern variation on the vision of art set out by Mao in his Yan'an talks of 1942. Since the turn of the millennium, there has also been an active governmental recuperation of contemporary Chinese art to inward and outward-looking assertions of traditional cultural identity. Assertions which, on the one hand, serve to buttress a continuing agenda of anti-imperialist resistance, and on the other, to provide a reassuring sense of continuity at a time of significant social and economic upheaval. The combined effects of these factors is an increasing reinforcement, in some quarters at least, of nationalist, essentialist attitudes, also including Chinese artists. Present-day assertions of Chinese exceptionalism are, of course, open to interpretation as a form of what Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, among others, have referred to as strategic essentialism, resistant to the persistence of Western colonialist imperialist relations of dominance. In practice, however, such assertions are wedded strongly to questionable nationalist discourses used to underpin CCP's neo-Confucian upholding of the idea of a harmonious society. Such discourses continue to be upheld by the CCP not only as an ideological counterweight to the profoundly destabilising effects of China's precipitous programme of social and economic reforms since the late 1970s, but also as a cornerstone of its own political legitimacy as a continuing focus for governance. As a member of this university, Craig Clunas has indicated, with reference to the work of the Chinese film and video installation artist Yang Fedong, the question of whether we choose to emphasise the Chineseness or the globalised nature of contemporary Chinese art is a fundamentally political one that has no easy or definitive answer. Although Clunas does not choose to elaborate further upon this statement, it can be understood to imply that while Chinese national cultural exceptionalism remains anathema in relation to still internationally dominant post-colonialist attitudes towards the critical standing of contemporary art, any outright move to dismiss that exceptionalism stands in danger of a return to colonialist relations of dominance. In short, we cannot choose to align ourselves resolutely with an established international post-colonialist perspective against differing localised points of view without what would appear to be a self-contradictory denial of difference. What persists then is a highly problematic, double-edged, labyrinthine parallax. By taking account of Chinese contemporary art's dualistic relationship to modernity and tradition, there is a danger of entering into unjustifiably orientalising, stroke essentialist views of the significance of contemporary Chinese art, and therefore of overemphasising its cultural separateness from other forms of contemporary art. By downplaying the Chineseness of contemporary Chinese art, there is also the risk of overlooking the persistence of tradition as part of the critically resistant construction of a modern Chinese national cultural identity. The work of the critical interpreter of contemporary Chinese art, as well as the transnational cultural networks that support its production, display and reception, whether Chinese or non-Chinese, is thus revealed to be a profoundly challenging one, which points towards the critical necessity of new and almost certainly wholly unrealisable theoretical paradigms beyond those currently envisaged both within the PRC and in an international context. I'm coming to my conclusion now. One possible way forward I would wish to have here is the use of polylogues, that is to say intertextual multi-voiced discourses, as a means of opening up differing interpretative perspectives on contemporary Chinese art to one another, while at the same time internally dividing and questioning their individual authorities. A strategy exemplified by Jacques Derrida's radical collage text Glass of 1974, which juxtaposes readings of texts by G.W.F. Hegel and Jean Genet to pervasively unsettling critical effect. Crucial to this methodological approach is Derrida's conception of intertextual telepathy. As Claudette Sartilio indicates, this does not amount to a misplaced belief on Derrida's part in an occultist connection between otherwise materially discrete instances of signification, but instead, and more justifiably, in the deconstructive openness of the medium of language to distant influences as a consequence of the aleatory processes of reading, rereading, conducted in the space between text and consciousness. The implication of which, Sartilio explains, is a telecommunication between words within a single language and between different languages, whereby one's discourse is always already contaminated by that of the other, which never allows itself to be either totally excluded nor totally included. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that overview and for keeping so well to time.
Oh, good.
I appreciate it. I'm going to move straight on to Professor Yang Yi, who's a professor at the Beijing Film Academy and also sits on committees of the China Film Association and the China Academy of Film and Literature. She's going to be examining the reception of contemporary Chinese film and is going to tell us 3 kinds of story in Chinese cinema.